When the Boy Scouts first started in 1910, things were vastly different. Schools were segregated, women couldn't vote, and child labor ran rampant in large cities and factories. We've changed a lot since then. Gender roles have changed drastically since then as well. Women can be anything a man can be, except in the title of a Boy Scout. Does the name implicitly state that only males should be allowed entry? Society has done much to break down the gender barrier in our everyday lives. Women are no longer relegated to the support roles of our daily lives. They're the driving force behind many programs and organizations. They can run companies, have positions in office, and make financial decisions for their families. They've finally been afforded many of the same rights as men, except they can't learn about the great outdoors with them. They can't learn to tie knots and volunteer and camp with boys. Young girls and transgender girls are being denied entry into an organization that says it values honor and bravery. But there's no honor in denying rights. Why shouldn't they have the right to pick between the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts?
Girl Scouts began in March 12, 1912, 106 years ago. And now there are 2.6 million strong, and 1.8 million of those are young girls. Girl Scouts are referred to as the acronym GIRL, which stands for Go-Getter, Innovator, Risk-Taker, and Leader. These are the qualities members of Girl Scouts strive to obtain. The main goal of Girl Scouts is to build young characters' courage, confidence, and character. This goal has been achieved by proof of the statistics that 1/2 of businesswomen were Girl Scouts, and 75% of current female senators were Scouts as well. If we allowed girls to join Boy Scouts, all of the Girl Scouts' accomplishments would be forgotten, and no longer would the legacy, history, and objectives of the organization be relevant. Their achievements would have mattered none. Aside from destroying the image of Girl Scouts, we would also present ourselves with the risk of inappropriately integrating the sexes, and the financial gaining on both Boy and Girl Scouts would be greatly affected due to the dividing of profits.
Have you ever noticed that when girls attend Girl Scouts, they tend to be more helpful, mature, and trustworthy when they attend activities with what they attend with the opposite sex? It gives them a sense of friendly competition and helps them strive to be more involved. This also gives them a chance to learn the skills they need for success. In present day, female leadership is urgent. Giving the females a chance to interact and work with males give them a chance to flourish in success. The need for female leadership has never been clearer or more urgent than it is today, and only Girl Scouts has the expertise to give girls and young women the tools they need for success. The Girl Scouts said in a statement, "Uniting as one has taught the kids to be more open-minded and reasonable with today's society. Bringing the two genders together creates a more diverse and conservative program. Many kids have taken new outlooks on sexual identity and languages. Girls can also have the chance to earn the Eagle Scout, which is the highest achievement in the program. There are many sexual constraints in society, but girls have chosen to prove men wrong by stepping up to the plate and showing they can do anything they set their mind to."
One large problem with integrating girls into the Boy Scouts is the intermingling within the campsite. It's almost impossible to keep track of all the children on the campsite once the adults go to their tents for bed. Teenage children are wild, unpredictable, and most often quite hard to control. Who knows what could happen with these teenagers when they are left alone on a campsite? It's not only dangerous, but frankly, it's quite idiotic to think that teenage children will not do inappropriate things when left alone. With hormones running wild, things that could happen on the campsite are unforeseeable, and to leave them alone overnight would not be wise. And although this is an extreme case, look at Hitler Youth. Hitler Youth was a camp created by Hitler and the Nazi Party during World War II, which included a section for boys aged 14 to 18, boys aged 10 to 14, and girls. This was a camp under Hitler people would send their children to in order to train them to become Nazis. They would camp on the beach, and months later, some of the girls would just magically end up pregnant. While this is an extreme case, they would be under the same circumstances and the same results could and likely would occur. This type of behavior goes against everything that both BSA and GSA stand for, and is absolutely not chivalrous or kind.
So, by a show of hands, who here has heard of the Eagle Scout Award before today? Okay. A lot of you. How many of you have heard of the Gold Award? I count 5. So that is just one example of how the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, as they are separately, are in equal. While the award of the Gold Award, being the highest rank you can attain in the Girl Scouts, is the rough equivalent of the Eagle Scout Award for girls. It is not nearly as widely recognized. With the Eagle Scout Award comes numerous scholarship opportunities, an immediate rank up when enlisting in the military, and a very strong addition to any resume. With the Gold Award, not so much. There is no military acknowledgement, the award does not carry nearly as much weight, and the scholarships, aside from those actually awarded by the Girl Scout Association, are not nearly as extensive or numerous. Allowing girls to strive for the same level of achievement as boys would stand as proof that the girls are just as capable and would allow them to receive the same high level of recognition that the boys receive for their efforts.
By allowing the girls to enter Boy Scouts, you lose the individuality of the two of Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. In 1912, Juliet Gordon Low envisioned an organization that would prepare girls to meet their world with courage, confidence, and character. This was in the midst of the progressive era, which is a time when women in the U.S. couldn't yet vote. And Mrs. Lowe was a nearly deaf 51-year-old woman, but she sparked worldwide movement inspiring girls to embrace their individuality, strength, and intellect together. Mrs. Lowe gathered 18 girls in her hometown of Savannah, Georgia, to share what she had learned about a new outdoor and educational program for youth, and with this, the Girl Scout movement was born. Along with Mrs. Lowe, these first Girl Scouts blazed trails and redefined what was possible for themselves and for girls everywhere. That small gathering of girls Mrs. Lowe hosted over a century ago has grown into a global movement in which all girls can see themselves reflected and brought to people's attention. It includes 2.6 million Girl Scouts, and it's in 92 countries with more than 5 million former members, and they are united across distance and decades of lifelong friendships due to the Girl Scout program. Girls joining Boy Scouts would ruin this cherished history and ruin the individuality of Girl Scouts, because it wouldn't be an individual organization if girls started joining. And one of the main things you think about when you think of Girl Scouts, how many of you think cookies first off? One hand just shot up and then dozens of others were raised. The first thing when you look up Girl Scouts on Google is cookies. More specifically, when I looked it up earlier this morning, Girl Scout cookies was the first response. Girl Scout Cookies 2018 was shortly after, and then Girl Scout Cookies Border. While it's not ideal for their cookies being the only thing Girl Scouts are recognized for, it gives them an individuality that makes them stick out from the Boy Scouts. And you lose these unique aspects of Girl Scouts if you allow the girls to integrate themselves into the Boy Scouts.
As a boy or as a girl, do you prefer strenuous or dainty activities? Maybe both. Do you prefer to work in a group or to work alone? I believe that there is enough differences in a girl and a Boy Scout for it to be necessary for a scout to pick whether they should be a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, or in a group where gender doesn't play a role. Having girls and boys separated with differentiated tasks stereotyping what a girl or a boy should be like. Yes, the Scouts do similar things, but they're not exactly the same. For instance, boy and Girl Scouts both go camping when they're young. But boys actually camp outside in a tent while the girls stay in a cabin. The boys learn how to make a fire while the girls roast hot dogs and make s'mores on the fire that is put together for them. Yes, there are girls who would prefer to stay in a cabin, but what about the more adventurous girls who would rather be connected with the wilderness outside in the tent? Boy Scouts work independently, completing most part of their tasks by themselves. On the contrary, girls spend the majority of their time working in a group with other girls. While both teamwork and independence are both important skills needed in life, it should be a choice because no child is the same. You should be able to choose which skills to work on, as you may lack more on one skill rather than the other. In the military, men and women are integrated together to work as a team. They are put into the same environment. Even though women aren't in the front line, they are still expected to perform the same tasks and enjoy the same training. Giving girls the choice to join Boy Scouts will give girls and boys another opportunity to cooperate with each other at a younger age, as they will have to in their order. Society has made boys seem like they are capable of achieving more than girls. Opening up the choice for a girl to be a Boy Scout or creating a scout group where gender is unbiased would encourage girls to strive in order to prove that they can achieve just as much as anyone else.
The Girl Scouts have made a $700 million empire, unloading approximately 200 million boxes of cookies since 1999. For each box sold, 75% of that profit goes to the troop and the rest goes to the bakeries. Boy Scouts have made profits exceeding $800 million since their creation in 1910. Both of these organizations have paved their way, making their own profits and building their own empires. To mesh these two organizations together would cut these profits pretty much in half, as they would be selling the same products and cutting out a variety that the population had to choose from. The community is going to want to buy the same products from multiple people. Granted that there would be a larger number of troops selling these products, there aren't enough consumers in their communities to match the number of producers.
In closing, the Girl Scouts of America uses their website to say that parents or guardians make all decisions regarding program participation that may seem of a sensitive nature. Here we see that the GSUSA, or the Girl Scouts of America, are not girls only anymore. They welcome other genders, so why are we pushing this misogynist agenda of the Boy Scouts? It's very interesting how out of the two largest youth organizations in America, the Boy Scouts are still segregating between men and women, but the Girl Scouts are welcoming change. It is 2018, people. It's not 1910 or 1912. 2018.
With the problems presented by my colleagues, it is important not only to recognize these as issues, but a chance for program reform. Now, I know the pro side has mentioned that there are many opportunities within the Boy Scouts for girls to cross over to their side, but why would we do that when there's already such a good foundation within the Girl Scouts? The main argument for letting girls join the Boy Scouts is that in their individual troops, they're not receiving the same opportunities as the BSA. Now granted, some Girl Scout troops are very active in activities such as pioneering and camping, but the merit is not necessarily universal within the organization. So the question is, how can this be fixed? Well, let's look at some Boy Scout merit badges. We have wilderness survival, life saving, mining in the community, nuclear science. The list goes on and on to make a grand total of 137 merit badges. Now let us look at the Girl Scout badges. There's the My Great Day badge, where girls journal their happenings in a day. There's the Senses badge, where Girl Scouts use their 5 senses to complete tasks. Let's briefly compare in our minds. It's not exactly equal, is it? A study was done to show that most of the merit badges in Boy Scouts focuses on self-oriented outdoor activities, while Girl Scouts focus on while Girl Scout badges focus more on communal, artistic activities. This offers a chance for the organization to reform their program and give a more fair chance to the Girl Scouts to experience these advanced activities. Not only are the badges a problem, but there is no recognizable equivalent to the Eagle Scout rank within the Girl Scouts. Many colleges examine applications that list Eagle Scout, improving that individual's chance to be accepted into that college. However, the highest rank in Girl Scouts is Gold Rank, which isn't recognized as much as Eagle Scout rank. Definitely, this problem needs to be fixed within colleges and even society in order to display a girl's achievement and what she deserves. Overall, if you were a little girl wanting to excel in herself and spend time with peers, which organization would you turn to? If you say the Boy Scouts of America, there might be a problem.
Okay, so now we're going to let both sides ask questions.
So I believe 3 out of 5 of you hinted in some way that the two groups were going to merge together, but that's not the case being presented. The idea is that girls will be given the choice to join either the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts, not to combine the two's capital and make the money from the cookie sales universal between the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts.
We were were just making a hypothetical situation just in case that they would merge. There was actually an article online stating that there could be a possible merge in the future, and with the route that we're going with, letting girls into the Boy Scouts, that doesn't seem irrational.
But that's not the debate at hand. That's a different debate. I mean, the debate at hand is whether girls should be allowed in the Boy Scouts, and they're not. Misogynistic, if you ask me. Why can't they?
But if they start allowing girls in the Boy Scouts, did you shut off the mic? I couldn't hear it. But if you allow girls in the Boy Scouts, that would give way to a path where they would merge.
But we've already seen this on the Girl Scout side, where as long as the adult members of the group, I don't know the name of the families of the group, are willing to allow a boy to join, they are allowed. And the Girl Scouts has come out and said that there is none of the higher-ups are for the idea of merging the two groups, that this movement by them was separate than the idea of merging the groups. So why can't it be that same way with the Boy Scouts, allowing girls?
It necessarily can, and that's not necessarily a problem. The Boy Scouts should be open to different ideas that the Girl Scouts are exemplifying in their organization. But our argument is more based on a woman's independent feeling within the Girl Scout organization, because as you've seen with the history, I mean, that's a lot of history and foundation for, a lot of girls to look up to,
Shouldn't
like
women
role models such as.
Shouldn't women be able to feel independent with men? I mean, look at the workplace. Women and men have to work together. Why are we training boys to work with just boys and girls to work with just girls? I mean, the Girl Scouts have already accepted male or transgender males into their group. Why aren't we teaching the boys, like you as a scout, how to work with women as well? And why are we only teaching the young boys of America how to work with just the male gender?
Well, also within this, there is some leeway within the Boy Scouts. Now, not a lot of people know nobody probably knows what the venture program is within the Boy Scouts. Nobody? Yes. The venture program allows, it's not necessarily, it is a Boy Scouts of America organization. It's just not being a Boy Scout, but it allows girls to come and have the same opportunities as Boy Scouts now. Up at places such as Camp Conestoga and Somerset, PA, they have girl venturers who come up and do the merit badges the same as guys. And they stay within some of the campsites separate, but still appropriate.
When we went up to Conestoga, how many of those female venture scouts did you see as compared to the droves of boys that were there?
That's a problem, but it is a problem. Okay, but I have a question for you. Girl Scouts, as you pointed out, you said that they don't have the same outdoor opportunities as Boy Scouts, but that's not necessarily correct. They do have a lot of the same badges as some of the Boy Scouts, like camping, hiking, those kinds of outdoor activities. So why would we try to integrate them into another program when there's already such a good foundation in the Girl Scouts program for that kind of?
Why did you, if you just said that there are many of the same badges, why did you then target the Girl Scouts' worst badges? Because I remember I was a Cub Scout, and I remember some pretty useless badges. So why did you then try to make the Girl Scouts look bad by saying they have pretty stupid badges, whenever they have badges that are of the same merit as Boy Scouts?
The main point is that we don't have a lot of individuals in the community who advocate these badges. It's more like sell cookies,
Now that cookies is, that grinds my gears, Garen. Girl Scouts are selling cookies? Yes. Boy Scouts sell popcorn. Girl Scouts sell cookies to teach entrepreneurship. That's teaching something. That's just, oh no, let's just go sell cookies. No.
I'm not saying that, but
How many of you like Girl Scout cookies? How many of you like Boy Scout popcorn?
It looks like the Girl Scouts figured something out over the Boy Scouts here.
it might grind your gears, but I'm not saying Girl Scout cookies in an entrepreneur way. It's a stereotype, would we not say? that it is a stereotype for girls.
Because they made something better than the boys.
Exactly, so why are you agreeing?
I'm not agreeing with you.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Girl Scouts are being stereotyped for these Girl Scout cookies, and that's all they do. So troop leaders come in. No.
As
One more question and then we'll take questions from the audience.
as a Boy Scout myself, I feel just as bitter about the cookie cells being better than the popcorn cells, and I am just as offended by what you're saying. So
That's not exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. The audience. Guy in the middle. Peyton.
Hello? Hey, hi, I'm Peyton. First, I have a question for Con. Most of your arguments were based upon how good the Girl Scouts were, how amazing it was. But haven't you considered there's a reason why these girls want to join the Boy Scouts instead of staying in Girl Scouts? There's obviously a problem somewhere. And you mentioned that the merit badges weren't the same, they were significantly different. If the men's merit badges were more advocating for these girls, then why would they want to be in Girl Scouts in the first place?
Because of social familiarity. So girls, not saying that this is always the case, but girls usually go with girls, boys usually go with boys. And you see that in an elementary school community. That is why they would join Girl Scouts. It's when they're actually in it that they realize and they start to grow into their teen years. Hey, we haven't been doing really the same stuff as Boy Scouts have. And so their main argument is that they're not getting the same opportunities. And that's where I'm calling for a reform. We need a reform within the Girl Scout program, because why would you want this is sensible. Why would you want a girl to retreat into the man instead of trying to be an independent woman and stay within an organization with other independent girls?
But you're not really addressing the problem. The problem here is there's obviously something wrong with the girls, and you said there was going to be a reform. But what's the point of a reform if there's something better that already exists?
If there's something that already exists like that, my argument is not necessarily about them trying to go into the Boy Scouts just because of the opportunities. I'm talking about we already have an organization with so much history and so much in the Girl Scouts.
But
That's what I'm saying, the Girl Scouts.
the history
So much.
doesn't
Yes, the
matter
Boy
to
Scouts
them.
has a lot of history, but
Let's say they want to make history in a different organization. Why would they stay in that one in the first place?
Garrett's gonna stop talking. Next question. Anybody?
yeah, this is really biased, but it's what I'm talking about.
My question is to the con side or to the pro side. The con side brought up a valid point about boys and girls, teenagers being together is a very bad idea left alone. What do you guys think about that?
as someone who would not consider himself 100% straight, I tented on 4 different occasions with an openly gay scout, and nothing happened. So why can't we trust boys and girls to have that same thing?
Well,
And why are we blaming the scouts if the scout leaders should be
here's
controlling
the
what's
thing.
going on?
He just said that, he tried things with somebody else. So how can you try?
That is the opposite of what I said. Nothing happened, even though we done
I
that.
thought you
Tented, not attempted. Tented. T-E-N-T. You stayed in the same tent.
Oh, tented, got you. It's on.
For the con side, I just wanted to know why Hitler was brought up.
Well, it's just, it was a very extreme example, but an example of boys and girls being left in the same area overnight with, there's not as much supervision as you might think, and the girls would end up pregnant a few months later, and the parents would be very confused at why was my child not being supervised.
The only reason why I don't should merge into Boy Scouts is because the Girl Scouts if girls start joining Boy Scouts because of these opportunities, you're going to see more and more people leave that group. And eventually the Girl Scouts will just die out because everybody's in Boy Scouts. And the opportunities provided within the Girl Scouts that show women independent skills, working in a business field, could potentially be lost and jumbled with all of the other things that are taught to boys instead. And that's a problem in our society. We need to focus on that.
Okay, one more question and then we're done.
So, a question about so you're worried about boys and girls having sex, but what about girls and girls and Girl Scouts?
Yes.
I mean, boys can have sex in Boy Scouts and girls can have sex in Girl Scouts. Things still happen. You might not be able to get pregnant, but you can still get STDs and etc.
Well, sexual relationships goes a lot, I mean, even at this young of an age, goes against what Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts.
Exactly. It shouldn't happen, but it's still going to happen.
And I agree with you, that could happen, and it does happen, same-sex relationships within the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And why would we just, the problem is, we shouldn't be adding on to the heat. You know, it's a problem. I'm going to say, some bad stuff has happened in the past.
I've been in Girl Scouts. Some things have gone down in Girl Scouts.
Yeah.
It's still
It's not necessarily accepted, so we have to, present what is accepted.
The thing is, allowing girls and Boy Scouts could potentially lead to a bigger problem if they already have a problem with the homosexuals and getting into relations during Boy Scouts.
Doesn't there release the updated data? This is 2018. Why are they working on all these old?
Okay, we're done. Row 37 and column 7.
Hello everyone. I know that all of you here might already have an opinion on this topic, but I would like to ask everyone to keep an open mind. I would like to start out by saying that body mass index is a measure of body fat based on height and weight. I know that both sides might argue that the BMI should be altered because of the different body types. Instead of altering the BMI, maybe we should alter the reliance we have on it. Body mass index was designed to be used as a simple means of classifying the average sedentary or physical activity of our population with an average body composition. Body mass index is inexpensive, and because it requires only height and weight, which is easy to use by not only doctors and also the general public. BMI is also readily available for everyone. In conclusion, BMI is used as a screening tool for body fatness, not a diagnostic.
When you think of the BMI, or body mass index scale, have you really ever thought of it to be helpful at all? Sure, it was probably more effective in the past at one time or another, but times have changed. There are various types of heights, body types, and metabolisms. For instance, let us say there are two people in a room. They are both 5'11" males that weigh 210 pounds. The only difference is that the first male has a body fat percentage of 35%, while the second male has a body fat percentage of only 15%. One could obviously tell the difference between the two and infer which one is overweight and which one is not, though the BMI scale would suggest that they both fall under the obese category. Another problem is the range of the BMI scale is just not large enough, nor does it have a good enough variety. Just think of this. There are two women that are two different heights. One is 5'4" while the other is 5'3". They both weigh 170 pounds. The 5'4" female would be considered overweight, yet the 5'3" female would be considered obese. How can 1 mere inch determine obesity? Even though the BMI scale seems harmless, and most of us just talk about how much of a joke it is, there are some that are very cautious about their bodies, such as people with anorexia or bulimia. One is that when one's that cautious about their bodies, the BMI scale might think that the only thing they can rely on is the BMI scale to keep their weight under control. For example, if someone is 5'9", the BMI scale says that 140 pounds would be healthy for them. Yet depending on the body type and what the body fat percentage is, 160 pounds could be a healthier weight for them. But since they fully rely on the BMI scale, the person may think that they need to lose more weight, and then they might become extremely unhealthy. Overall, no matter what way one looks at it, BMI scale is not helpful at all. It is inaccurate and entirely outdated. For all these reasons, and there are more, why we should obliviate the BMI scale to something more modern and useful.
According to the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, the BMI of an individual is strongly correlated with the current golden standard methods for measuring body fat. It is a quick tool used by doctors and individuals that is a reliable indicator of obesity. For being as simple to calculate as it is remarkably accurate, with an 82% accuracy according to the New York Times. And when it is inaccurate, that is often because of individuals who lie significantly beyond the average in terms of lifestyle and physiology. Being as accurate as it is primarily used as a checkup tool in other routine health examinations to efficiently measure weight-related health risks. In fact, perhaps efficient is the best way to describe the BMI, a simple, easy, quick way to get reliable results, especially the way that health professionals use it. With medical and lifestyle data, and in cases where a higher degree of precision is necessary, it can be combined with waist measurements. It is undeniable that the BMI isn't an absolutely perfect diagnostic tool, but it isn't treated like it is. It is used as it's supposed to be, an average, reliable, predictive measurement.
The BMI scale ranges from underweight to obese. If your BMI is below 18.5, you are considered underweight. 18.5 to 24.9, you are considered overweight. 25 to 29.9 is considered overweight, and 30 or greater is considered obese. The definition of BMI, or body mass index, is a key index for relating weight to height. A person's weight in kilograms divided by his or her height in meters squared is the equation used to define someone's BMI. Now, how can this 19th century concept, created by a mathematician, not a physician, how is it able to define a person? Not everyone develops the same body shape, everyone is unique in their own ways. For instance, an extremely muscular person with the same height and weight as a larger person will have the same BMI, regardless of his or her structural difference. This also does not take into account the 1.5 pounds of water weight an average person carries around with them. The creators of the BMI scale had good intentions, but they did not take into account all the factors in the human body.
So, due to the BMI scale consisting of a single readily accessible chart, costs are greatly reduced for the average person. Other methods of determining health based on weight can cost upward of $100, something that the mildly curious gym enthusiasts wouldn't have just lying around. They wouldn't be willing to pay that, and secondly, they wouldn't have that generally. Like, I wouldn't have that. Someone who goes to the gym on weekends wouldn't have that, just laying around to eat. A DEXA scan, considered the only accurate way of determining your percentage of body fat, costs around $125, and it's only a 10 to 15 minute procedure, which seems pretty outrageous considering the cost. This makes it very difficult for people to get these procedures done, and the body mass index gives them something that they can base their health off of without breaking the bank, and it's a generally accurate thing to do. So it saves costs for the people doing it, like going to get their weight checked and stuff like that, and for the people who have to provide it, because there's no one who has to specifically provide it. You can go and you can find it online, you can find it almost anywhere. It's generally cost-free.
BMI just measures height and weight, so it's technically only viewing us as two-dimensional, cardboard cutout figures. BMI doesn't distinguish between fat mass and muscle mass, so people built like The Rock, for instance, would be considered overweight, even though he's vegan. BMI doesn't take into consideration gender differences or body shape. It also doesn't distinguish between the apple and pear shape. An apple shape, where most of a person's fat is in their abdomen, is proven to be more unhealthy than that of a pear shape, whose most of the fat is below the waist. Abdominal obesity can cause cardiovascular issues, respiratory issues, and or heart failure or disease. Thus, two different people, one with an apple shape and the other with a pear shape, could have the same BMI, but drastic differences in the risk of health and disease. But since the BMI doesn't measure the causes of health, it's hard to determine who's healthy and unhealthy amongst two people with the same BMI. Also, when dieting to lose weight, your BMI doesn't often fluctuate or change. Even though you're living a healthy lifestyle and eating properly, BMI often remains the same, which leads to the dieter to believe that they have failed in their weight loss journey. It's not specific, and there are too many flaws for us to fully rely on it alone. We need a system that measures all components of our bodies.
Should we alter the body mass index? The answer is no. Should we alter our reliance on the body mass index? That is the real question at hand. The body mass index standards are calculated by simple means. All you have to do is take your body mass and divide it by your body height. The use of the BMI scale is to indicate how your body fat may increase the risk of your heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. This standard of calculation is easily accessible to people of all ages and ethnicities. The BMI scale can be used by anyone. However, just because it is there to use does not mean that you have to use it. The question of this whole debate really stands as, should you rely on it? The answer to that question is characterized individually. When calculating the body mass, it should be known that it is only measuring if your height and weight is proportional. Some people would say, well, some people have different body shapes. No matter what shape you have, your weight will remain constant. With different body shapes, you will have the same mass just in different places. The body mass index is not there to tell you if you look good or not. It is merely there to indicate what health issues may arise based on the correlation of your height and weight. We should also take into account that the BMI is based on an average weight at that certain height. It is merely an average of the population. And if you are not in that average, why should you care? Why be average when you can be different? In the words of Megan Trainor, every interview is perfect from the bottom to the top. Altering the BMI index is not necessary. It is the reliance of the body mass index that should be changed. Thank you.
Now, even a new chart should not be used as an absolute indicator of whether a person's weight is ideal for their height. Other factors in how much muscle and fat they have should always be considered. Still, BMI is being used as an epidemic in a country. Also, insurance companies are relying more on BMIs to assess a patient's health risk, and doctors are now required to assess the BMI of every patient they see. If we're going to rely on this index for so much, it might help to at least bring it into the 3D world and finally start calculating it more sensibly. It is also embarrassing for nations in the world to base advice on how to prevent one of the leading causes of poor health and premature death on a 200-year-old numerical hack developed by a mathematician who was not even an expert in what was little known about the human body back then. Now we'll take questions from both sides.
So this is for the girl in the blue over there. You made a point about all the different body shapes and stuff. I just want to say that doesn't have anything to do with your weight. It's just the distribution of your weight. It doesn't have anything to do with how much of that is taken into consideration with your height versus your weight in the scale.
My point there was the fact that if you have more abdominal weight, you are more prone to heart disease. But BMI doesn't measure that.
But it's not meant to.
But it should, and that's the argument.
Well, okay, this is meant to be a general scale. It's not meant to cater to every individual's needs.
And that's why we should alter it and our dependence on it, because it doesn't cater to
The dependence on it that should be changed, not the actual BMI scale. Yes, that's our argument. Yes, the reliance on it should be changed. The BMI scale itself shouldn't be. If you really want to calculate your exact height, your exact weight, everything that's wrong with you, then go and take tests and do the most that you can to figure out what exactly is wrong if you really want to figure that out. This is just a simple means that is cost effective. It doesn't hurt to do it at home if you know how to do it.
Ma'am, you said that you agreed that we should change the reliance on it, correct?
Yes, the dependence that people have on it.
Okay, well, in topic 2 says, should we alter the BMI
standards or our reliance on them.
When it says reliance, it's referring to, medically speaking, our reliance, not the huge amount of weight that people place in it. We should change how much. What? No.
How do we tell if it means medical?
Individuals should not place as much weight in it as they do, because it is a general sort of standard procedure thing that are used in checkups to generally predict obesity. As it's currently used in the medical profession, it's effective if being used the way it is meant to.
So let me just, you agree that we should change the way we think about BMI, change our reliance on it, correct?
Are you talking about individuals, or are you talking about the medical?
As a whole, is that what you agree? That we should change the reliance on it?
Not as a whole.
You within its proper set. It's individual people who are like, hey, I want to go look up my BMI online. It'll for sure tell me if I'm healthy or not. Right.
If they're just misinformed.
Exactly. That's their point.
It doesn't really say if it means medical or not, medical reliance on it. It just says reliance. So how are we supposed to infer that it just means medical? Why can't we just think of it as a whole?
I'm assuming that it's medical reliance because you can't really instantly change how people view it. That's up to individual choice, how much research you do, how you think of it. When it says, should we change our reliance on it, I'm assuming that that means that, in a medical sense, that's asking, should we change it, as it's systematically applied.
And we're saying we should, you guys also say we should, so that's why I'm.
No, what we said.
Are there
is
any
that-
more questions? Okay, real quick. When last, you said that it's required by doctors to check your BMI. I don't know about you. Every time I go to the doctor, they're not like, ooh, we got to check their BMI. I've never had that happen, not once in my entire life.
They write it down on a chart. They may not tell you.
They don't check it, they check your height and weight and then you walk in and they do your BMI after your appointment.
It's written down.
Why is it the percentile graph?
Okay, questions from the audience?
No, they skipped us.
So this is for the con. You're talking about professionals using the BMI scale correctly, but the military does not. As a family, I have a family member who went to go into the military, but they said that he was obese, but he has a low percentage of body fat, a high percentage of body muscle, and he had to cut weight even though he was at a healthy position in his life based on the BMI scale. So they wouldn't be using it correctly because he was at a healthy weight for according to his muscle mass.
She's like, then I think that the military specifically should change how they're using it, but I don't think that this is talking about how the military uses it. This is talking about how it's used medically.
I have a question for the con side. Overall, how accurate is the BMI index?
According to the New York Times, it is 82% accurate.
And then pro side, why would you be against those statistics?
Because like you said, it doesn't take into consider water weight, doesn't distinguish between muscle mass or fat mass. So somebody who's exercising 30 minutes a day and building a lot of muscle who looks healthy would technically be overweight, and that's not right because they're not.
But it does take water weight into account because it's based on the human body. It's based on a national average.
It's fat, just fat. That's all it measures.
No, it's
It doesn't take into consideration.
Yes,
It
it
doesn't
does.
distinguish between
water weight, fat, and muscle. It just puts it all in one.
Amen.
But an average is calculated based on the human body.
Right, but it's not telling.
Like I said,
It's okay. What's your question?
Hi, I'm Peyton. So, referring to the question itself, said, should we alter the BMI, body mass index standards, or our reliance on them? You said, yes, we should change the reliance. How exactly would you do that?
There are also, I have some three, you can do it at home. There's different ones. There's the BAI scale. It's hip circumference by height, and it's widely believed to be more effective and accurate than the BMI scale. There is the waist and hip ratio, and there is the circumference of waist.
Are any of those approved by the Health Bureau?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Are any of those approved by the Health Bureau? BMI is the only approved form of body mass index correlation that's approved by the Health Bureau. There's no other forms currently approved.
When I was doing my research at the Harvard T.H. Chance School of Medicine, it said that there are some other scales being developed, but none of them have enough supporting data about their effectiveness to be used.
So how exactly can you say that that is more effective than the BMI? If they're
I
not
was just
approved?
saying that it's widely believed by people, maybe not doctors, but I was just saying that those are a few other alternatives. That's all.
Any other questions?
For the homicide, any of you, what's your BMI?
I couldn't hear you.
What's your BMI?
Doing research on ourselves, doing research on the system.
But if it's so important, then why don't you know it? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You're on. Speak into it.
Well then, might I ask you what your waist to hip ratio is and what your circumference to height ratio is?
Like you said, yeah, we're talking about BMI, that's a completely different argument.
I can't hear you. Could you please speak up and hold my
That's a completely... It's a completely different argument. I don't think that has to do anything
If
with
you don't know
BMI.
your BMI, why do you expect us to know ours?
And you're doing research on it.
We've been doing research on the scale on ourselves.
You guys are the ones calling it important, not her.
You also said that you didn't have to use it.
Okay, that's enough. Topic 1126, row 19.
The death penalty is a contentious issue. This is a given. We, the United States, have been born from a fight against tyranny. But is it tyrannical to let the enemies of state die, to give them a safe home away from society, while their victims and victims' families live, are ruined or destroyed forever? Is it not in the Is it not in the interest of state to have these moral traitors put to death for what they have done? I speak now in the abstract, but I have a list here of some of the federal crimes which can cause an execution. This is not an extensive list, this is merely some ones I picked out, but such things as a first-degree murder, murder by an escaped federal prisoner already sentenced to life imprisonment, murder during a kidnapping, murder during a hostage taking, murder for hire, murder related to rape or child molestation, murder by the use of a weapon of mass destruction, treason, death resulting from aircraft hijacking. These crimes are not only immoral, but unspeakable. One must be dissuaded against with ultimate force.
How much do you value your own life? A lot? A little? To a criminal, life isn't considered as sacred, like it is to you and I. Rather, it is used as disposable or inconvenient. Many criminals, especially serial ones, attempt suicide by cop. To them, a life in prison seems unbearable. They would rather die than live with the consequences of their actions. Is it our job as the people to make sure these criminals get exactly what they want? Inmates in death row are on constant suicide watch. This is because they would rather end their own life than sit, repent, and pay for what they did to people's families. Many people see their death as an eye for eye, but is it really? Is justice truly being served? If the loved one of yours were murdered, isn't it a natural defensive action for you want the guilty body to suffer? Them being murdered isn't suffering to them, because that is exactly what most of them want. Many of us forget that our citizens are also impacted by this decision. Taxpayers' money goes into keeping criminals a ward of the state. The government spends millions of dollars per year to feed, bathe, and provide for those who make our country an unsafe and unjust place. Those in the working class have to work every day to keep a roof over their head, while rapists, murderers, and thieves live for free. A typical death row inmate sits and lives on death row for over 10 years. In March of 2017, about 40% of convicts spent more than 20 years on death row prior to their execution, not including time spent in jail during their trials. In New Mexico alone, the death penalty cost as much as $7.2 million over the first 3 years that it was enforced. Everyday people like you and I are considered to have normal functioning brain activity. However, many diagnosed psychopaths lack the chemical serotonin. This interferes with a person's inability to produce happiness. They have weaker connections between parts of their brain, such as the amygdala and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Without this, psychopaths lack emotional balance, the ability to fear, and memory cognition. Some psychotics have the inability to empathize, understand the seriousness of their crimes, or even remember the crime they committed. These people need medicine and not banishment. They deserve help and not death. Let's think about this logically. Justice in the literal sense means a just behavior or treatment, but is it truly a just treatment if every murderer doesn't await the same fate? In Nebraska during 2016, there were 1,842 murders. That's in one single state. After these deaths were put on trial, only 281 of them were first-degree murder convictions. That's only 15% of all the murders. Out of the 281, only 119 cases sought that the death penalty were to be convicted for the guilty party. 33 achieved this goal. So out of all the murderers so far, only 33 people have been convicted. Out of the 33, 13 of them had sentence reductions, 1 of them was set free, 10 of them underwent the appeal process to have a lower sentence, and 6 of them died naturally in prison awaiting the death penalty. We are now down to 3 prisoners. Out of 1,842 murders, only 3 guilty parties are been convicted. Of these men and women committed the same crime, murder, yet they did not all receive the same punishment. Is this what we call justice?
An average prisoner in the United States costs the taxpayer approximately $31,307 per year to house and feed as of 2010. Let's imagine that a man is found guilty of committing a murder in a state where the death penalty is not legal and is given the second harshest sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, if we imagine that this prisoner was incarcerated when they were just 35 years old and will spend the rest of their life in prison until the death at age 80, the prisoner will end up costing the taxpayer an estimated $1.4 million as compared to the $83 that it takes to execute an inmate by lethal injection, as estimated by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Keeping in mind that this prisoner has no chance of being freed, this seems like a bad deal for the U.S. taxpayer.
Why should we kill these inmates? For revenge? What is our fascination with death as a society? If we are going to keep someone suspended long-term, even up until their death, why not benefit from them, instead of have them take up space in government money? We could benefit by putting the convicts to work, expanding our usage of prison labor and industry as allowed by the 13th Amendment. To quote, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." They could create goods and do service within the prison, while under surveillance by guards, of course. For this to work, we should abolish death row as a whole, maintaining the current added restrictions on death row inmates and housing them alongside normal supermax inmates. In doing so, we could save money on their overall terms, as well as create space by merging the two groups. To cite a 2008 investigation by the Reading Eagle, Pennsylvania has spent an estimated $272 million per execution, like housing them up until the injection. And it calculated that the cost of sentencing 408 people to death was an estimated $816 million higher than the cost of life without parole. No matter how you kill these people, other people will be unhappy. It will spur outrage from various groups across the nation, and nothing will really be accomplished in the end. Killing the killers, does that make us any better than them? What if we started to steal from the thieves, or burn the houses of arsonists? I understand this is a flawed explanation, but what if?
Firstly, I'd like to open with the idea of law. Within the United States, there are plenty of defined laws that don't work as planned or are avoided by other laws. One of these are the death penalty, and it has completely avoided the idea of punishment. Plenty of death row inmates avoid their punishment by appealing and having retrials. This creates an easy escape. They're given housing, food, and protection for the rest of their lives if they do so please. To circumvent this mistake of law would not only be a deterrent for future criminals, but it would also save tax money. Now, plenty of the arguments clearly based around the death penalty involve cruel and unusual punishment. Our Eighth Amendment right. The status for these criminals are defined by who they are and not what they do. You can't consider the actions of a person doing something once, but what's the threat of them doing it again? Many of these death row inmates are housed alongside regular inmates with semi-harsh criminal actions, but plenty of these people plan to be released on parole. This is a direct threat to not only the people housed in these prisons, but the guards and more. Law has hardened meaning, and for those people to avoid such is not only cowardice, but it destroys the efficacy of their sentence. To refer to the first person here, U.S. Code 359:18, sentence of death, C, mental capacity. A sentence of death shall not be carried out upon a person who is mentally retarded or suffers from other mental disorders. A sentence of death shall not be carried out upon a person who, as a result of a mental disability, or lacks the mental capability to understand the death penalty and why it is imposed on that person.
The United States and Japan are the only developed countries to recently have carried out executions. The U.S. federal government and 31 states have a valid death penalty option, and over 1,400 executions have been carried out in the United States since it reinstated the death penalty in 1976, including 28 in 2015. A study of these executions carried out in the United States between 1977 and 2001 indicated that at least 34 of the 749 executions, or 4.5%, involved, quote, unanticipated problems or delays that caused at least arguably unnecessary agony for the prisoner or that reflect the gross incompetence of the executioner. The rate of these botched executions remained steady over the course of the study.
The death penalty creates another form of crime deterrent warning against heinous crimes. A professor at Pepperdine University wrote in 2007, or published a study in 2007 that examined the relationship between the number of executions and the number of murders in the U.S. for a 26-year period in 1979 to 2004. The research shows that each execution carried out was correlated with about, on average, 18 fewer murders the following year. In the early 80s, the return of the death penalty was associated with a drop in the number of murders too. There was an obvious negative correlation. When executions increase, murders decrease. Now, it is possible that this relationship could be coincidence, but they did a regression analysis that showed that the odds against the pattern being simply random happening are about 18,000 to 1. This simple but dramatic relationship reveals that the deterrent effect of capital punishment. The death penalty could benefit society by deterring murders and saving innocent lives.
Back in ancient times, the laws of certain city-states permitted eye for an eye law codes. If one person murdered another's child, then the latter may have done the same to the former's own child. This is ancient to us now. It's barbaric. Just as now, we do not burn down the homes of arsonists, we should not assume that we are righteous enough to commit our own murders. Think of how we view modern countries that utilize state-sponsored murder, gas chambers, firing squads. We know that these are horrific, and yet we think we're better just because we'll slaughter one criminal at a time. I'd like everyone to remember a few hundred years ago to France and the invention of the guillotine. That was intended to be a humane way to kill off people who've been sentenced for their crimes. It was seen as humane. It was so humane, in fact, that the time in which it was most widely used is known to us today as the Reign of Terror. And so, if we want to separate ourselves from the wrongdoers of history, the barbarians, the cruel, those who reign with terror, then we must live up to our nation's own ideals. And the pro side has brought up our laws, and I would like to say that our laws in this country are meant to uphold our rights, our unalienable rights, among them liberty and happiness, and above all, life.
The death penalty has always been a heated debate of whether or not it should be kept in society. The voices to take it down repeatedly say that it's uncivilized, expensive, and untrustworthy. Just like any other program, whether it is healthcare or immigration, they all have their flaws. This is why everyone on this stage should agree that the process of how the death penalty is taken about should be reformed, but the function should not be impeded upon. The reasons for having the death penalty are too great and the reforms are too easy. The death penalty is the most severe punishment that a person can get. The second most severe is life in prison with no parole. Let's say you take away the death penalty, leaving life in prison as the top punishment. Instead of the accused appealing for life in prison, they will now appeal for life in prison with a parole or even a 50-year sentence. The point is that the criminal has a chance of getting out of prison with there being no death penalty option. Not only this, but the justice system will have to move every offense down a degree because you would be making a murder case equal to a lower level offense. This means that arson or a high-stake robbery can no longer be life in prison because certainly you cannot say that action is equal to a mass murder. There is also a sense of a deterrence factor when you have the death penalty. Of course, people will always bring up that in some states that do not have the death penalty, the murder rate is actually lower, but this all depends on the population size, the leaders, and the specific area. I know one thing, a criminal would rather be in prison for life, getting food, a warm area, and a shelter than being sentenced to death. This is also a sense of justification for the community and the victim. It would not be fair that families, lives, and neighborhoods get torn apart over the murder of a loved one, and the murderer gets to enjoy the hospitalities that I previously stated.
Okay, so in conclusion, why should we show that killing is wrong by killing the criminal? A jury is more likely to give the criminal a lesser sentence if they know that they are going to be sentenced to life or to death. It doesn't bring the victim back, and it doesn't justify their death if we kill the person that killed them. And the victim's family loses as well as the perpetrator's family. And if we use an eye for an eye in this country, since we're trying to be so futuristic and modern, it doesn't really help us grow morally as a country, and it really just doesn't reflect well on our country as a whole. The justification behind it is, why should we kill the person, or why is it illegal to kill a person if you're a member of society, but for the government it's a-okay to kill them? There's no punishment for the government. The three typical drugs to use in, lethal injection-wise, one causes unconsciousness, one causes muscle paralysis, and one stops the heart. This can take up to 2 hours if the, executioner can't find a suitable vein, and the average minute, or the average number of minutes for the, process of death is 7 minutes. It really just doesn't justify why we should as a country be able to kill people and have no consequences as a government, And as a person in society, we should be, I guess, not victimized, I guess, criminalized for killing other people. It's not fair.
This on? I'm Peyton. Firstly, I'm going to refer to the Reign of Terror. You do realize that that was religious persecution, correct?
Incorrect.
Okay. This was religious persecution. What we're talking about here is law. There are two different situations. During that time...
Not law. Is persecution not law?
Persecution is law. Religious persecution is not law. It is two separate biases. See, the way you think about it is, religious persecution was enforced by either the Catholic Church or any other form of religious group around that time. Not referring to France, but other groups. Religious persecution was only enforced because they had religious power or authority, yes. So there's two separate situations. You can't refer to that as being enforced if it's not a law. What we're talking about here is a law. This should be enforced and is enforced in some states, referring to Texas.
However, where certain states did have certain state-sponsored churches, this is a time where your religion was very closely tied to your laws.
This isn't. Something real quick. U.S. Code 359-218, mitigating and aggravating factors to be considered in determining whether a sentence of death is justified. And one of these here is referring to religion. Religion should be involved, and is also whenever you agree to be the jury, you have to make sure that you have no bias towards that person or religious bias. So how can you say that religion was involved with this?
The Reign of Terror was not religious. It was the French Revolution. Thank you.
The Catholic Church was involved.
The Catholic Church was involved because of what happened, and a whole new religion came up. It wasn't based on religious prosecution because the government was false.
Garrett, the Reign of Terror is also referred to as the Spanish Inquisition. There's two of them.
Yes. Thank you.
Go
ahead.
I have a question. Like during your debate, I don't know if you went through and remember when you mentioned that criminals should pay for their sins.
I never said that.
Oh, okay. Well, I remember you saying something about sins because I wrote it down and I said it. But not everybody.
Sentence or sins?
Sins.
There's nothing written down here for sins.
Okay, well maybe I misheard you. Excuse me.
Yeah, it was about
Oh, okay, well then whoever mentioned, I'm sorry, I thought it was you. But if anybody mentioned it, not everybody believes in the same religion as you said. So.
Yeah, I truly believe that religious persecution isn't a bias here in the United States anymore. You look at majority of states and there's more atheists than there are Christians at this point. But I don't believe that they should die for their sins. It's a matter of law and justice. And if you were to take someone's life, the law states that that person should be...
The debate, though, now is to say whether or not those laws should be changed.
Yes.
So you saying the laws now is what they are, that is sort of not what we're focused on, what they are now. We're trying to say what they should be in the future.
What they should be.
What they should be. So should they be the
So
same
do
as
you
now?
have an alternative?
But you can't say that what they are now, and that's how they should always be, because we should always trying to improve what we already have.
Do you have an alternative?
Do we have an alternative to the death penalty?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe we have some statistics. It's very expensive to keep an inmate on death row for prolonged periods of time.
Yes. That's why we suggest the death penalty. We save a lot more taxpayers' dollars doing that.
Some of that's because of the increased security of keeping someone on the death row cell block.
Yeah,
it has increased maintenance. Everyone's on suicide watch.
If we're referring to this year, said that it saves over or within. It's a taxpayer an estimated $1,408,815. That's not including pays for a warden or guards and/or
those are costs that are already put forth in your regular prison system.
Yeah, but there are certain prisons that are just for death row inmates.
I have two questions. Okay. One for you on that, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
You said that bumping down death penalty sentence would like eventually bump down everything that's below that. But people on death row, they don't necessarily have to be a murderer. They could be a repetitive, convicted rapist. Yeah, I get that, but a rapist is still equivalized with a murder. So just say like if somebody rapes 3 children and then somebody else murdered 47, those really aren't equal crimes either, but they're both pursuing the same punishment.
I believe the point being made is it justified to take a life if a life wasn't necessarily taken for
So the idea of the capital punishment in this case isn't necessarily to do unto others what they've done unto you. The idea is to punish moral infringement upon society. Yeah. So saying that this person, they've done something unspeakable, say rape, say murder, say they killed 20 people in a house fire.
Correct. So our argument is that a moral infringement upon society would be to say, hey, people kill each other, we kill them. To us, that morally should not be the way that things work. We believe that there should be a better option down the line in the future for what our capital punishment law should be, if they should exist at all.
The life in imprisonment, say, right? So, say I murdered my fellow friend here, right? He's dead. I'm currently now, most likely I get a death sentence. It's first degree murder, I thought of that ahead of time. However, if it was, say, no death penalty, the life in prison, I would be rewarded with food, shelter, most likely some sort of prison community. I would have to pay taxes, obviously, yep. And I believe some states you can even vote as a prisoner. So basically, I don't have to worry about getting a job. I don't have to worry about paying for my home, or food, or anything. But everything provided for me. That's lovely.
Which is why we suggested a way to counteract that.
Execution.
Here,
I suggested prison labor in my...
I mean, that's also an opinion, because for me, I wouldn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't want to do that.
Be that as it may, though, losing your life is a lot more cut and dry form of punishment.
But you're not suffering.
I mean,
exactly.
You're just dead.
We don't want you to suffer. That's cruel and unusual. That's the 8th Amendment.
And that's exactly what they did to other people. That's what you're saying. You're saying that it's justified because they did something so horrible, but now they don't have to live with what they did. They don't have to think about what they did. They don't have to repent. They don't have to feel sorry.
The point is, though, if they're in prison for life, why do they have to repent? They don't care. They've got everything taken care of already. There's no reason, there's no incentive for them to repent. There's no reason they should repent.
And killing them won't make them repent either.
It won't. It won't. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the point I'm trying to make is this. I guarantee if I asked everyone in this room if they would prefer to be executed or put in prison for life, the majority would say be put in prison for life. If I said...
Yeah, but criminals, they don't have the right state of mind. They don't think like you and I.
I know they don't think
So they would rather die than spend...
Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Questions from the audience?
Let it go.
Let it go,
Let it go.
I have one. What happens if you're wrong? What happens if they were innocent? Because there's a lot of faults in the judicial system. There's a lot of things that are wrong with our judicial system. No, it's fine. There's a lot of problems in our
judicial system. And what happens when you murder somebody and you have to go back to their family and tell them that you were wrong?
1 to 2%. I mean, listen, this is...
Yeah, but it still happens and
I
there's still
understand
lives
that.
that are
Yes,
lost.
yes. Nothing's perfect. This is a factual world.
Exactly, so why just not kill anybody? Then you don't have to worry about that 1%.
There was a case I remember reading about recently where a man was put in prison for life for a sentence he received. He spent, I believe it was 70-some years in prison. And at the end of that time, they found that he was innocent after years and years of him pleading to them that he was innocent. The man died a few short, I believe it was years after he was released from prison. I mean, leaving someone to suffer their entire life in prison?
So what you're saying is that that man should just be killed off?
Yeah, we should just kill
In a perfect world, I would prefer the man not to be thrown in prison in the first place. However, I mean, the difference between spending his entire life in prison or being executed, it's a toss-up. Who would you choose?
Okay, but if you're put in prison for life and you're at some point found innocent, then you are released. So there's that.
Yeah.
So that's
There is that hope.
Okay, I have a question.
It was
If you were dead, that couldn't happen.
Okay, the con side has brought up that it's not necessarily fair, like an eye for an eye is very outdated, and it's not fair that because they killed somebody to kill them. But as a high school student that works 2 jobs, I feel it's very unfair that my taxes go for them to live rent-free, tax-free, don't have to pay for their food, don't have to pay for shelter, heat or air conditioning, depending on the weather. But yet there they are.
Okay.
And it's also not fair that the families are sitting there, like you said, that doesn't bring back the person that they killed. The families, they're put away, but it's not helping them at all. But if they get sentenced to death, it gives them some sort of relief that, oh, okay, well maybe they won't get on good behavior in 50 or 60 years and they don't have to worry about that. It's just a relief knowing that justice was done to their family member that was dead.
Okay, there's 2 things. Okay, for one, your taxes go to a lot of other things besides the death penalty. That's probably like less than 1%. And for 2, even if you weren't paying for death row, you're still paying for jail and other things like that in general.
Yeah, that's what
and then for 2, okay, just say like if I murdered a person and then I'm being murdered, but now whoever murdered me isn't being murdered. So an eye for an eye, it's going to remain unbalanced. Either way, one person who murdered the other is, yeah, but they say if you do something to a person and they die, that's murder.
I didn't say my taxes go towards the death penalty, I said prisons in general, and I understand that they go towards helping the roads and education and stuff like that, but they do also go towards state and federal prisons. Thank you, that's what I was saying.
Wait. Can I, real quickly, before we move on, referring to like, when you're born with your rights, you're also born within the United States, you're born with laws. You agree to these laws when you're a U.S. citizen.
Our laws are designed to uphold those rights.
Yes.
So
Well, those rights, yes.
what we're doing is trying to make sure that everyone through due process gets the access to all of their rights. We say that they are inalienable because no one can take them away. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, unalienable. You're not
Pursuit of
supposed
happiness
to be
by
able to
killing
take them
people,
away in an
or
ideal society.
raping children, or being an arsonist. I don't feel like that is, I feel like that's not really happiness and or liberty.
Hi, I'm Peyton. And I'm Peyton.
Hi, Peyton.
So, I had a question for the con side. You brought up multiple times that it's not right for the government to be able to decide who gets to live and who gets to die. But what makes it right for the criminal who killed someone to decide that, and then the government not have that option?
We should be clear, we're not saying that if you commit murder that you're to be let free. You are to be punished duly within the limits that we believe a society should live up to.
It's just
so
like,
our limits on that would be we will not kill you, we will not stoop to your level in order to
yeah, but okay, if there is 153 men committed a murder, who is the government to say, oh, well, just you 2 should die, not you guys. I know you murder people too, but it's
because
okay.
they go to retrial. If I
No, but
choose to
those people
kill,
were convicted.
No, that's not the point. Those people didn't get the chance to retrial. If you have and persist when you're in the court of law, you can have a retrial and you can avoid death row for the rest of your life. It's practically just having life in prison. The whole point is,
So why not just have life in prison in the first place?
so then you can have a free life and have food. That's the point. They avoid it. So they can have food, they can have housing, they can avoid every form of consequence for doing something that was terrible. It's a capital offense.
Yeah, but who's to say that 2 people...
Our laws allow that to happen. There's a reason.
So what's your alternative?
There's
no alternative.
Here's a question.
What's up?
I have a question for the con side. You mentioned that it would be rapists and murderers on the same level. Why would you risk them doing it again? Like, they could get out with life in prison.
But what we're not saying...
We're not saying, we're saying, I believe what we're trying to say is that we don't want them to ever truly be in a position where that can happen again. We're saying that there are alternatives to just killing them, wherein we can reform them, create them into better citizens, and if we end up getting to a point where we decide they shouldn't be allowed back into society, they shouldn't be allowed back into society. That's ultimately not what we're arguing for. We're not trying to say that people who commit rape and murder
should never leave prison. We're not.
Should ever leave.
Life without parole is an option. It's a current offense, as they said, second highest up.
Exactly.
Okay, but
Yeah.
when you murder, it should just be life without parole, nothing else, no exceptions, no, oh, well, you were being a good boy while you're in prison, we're gonna let you go. No, you murdered somebody, you're staying in here forever. That's what we're trying to say.
You keep referring to what you want to happen, and then you say, oh yes, then we'll put them in life in prison. Then when we mention the tax problems, and not only that, the families who won't get the retribution of knowing
I
this
simply find it odd
you
that for
still
some
avoid them.
reason we value taxes over human life on the pro side.
There's a difference between mortality and law. That's the whole point. The criminals don't value human life.
Yeah, but you're valuing money over a person's life.
There's
Okay,
that
one question
person.
and then we're done. He has questions you can ask.
That's amazing.
I just want a little bit of clarification. In your first speech, you said that the criminals have something wrong with their brain, they don't feel empathy.
Some of them, not all of them.
Okay, they don't feel like sorry for what they did. But then in one of your arguments, you said, well, they don't have time to feel sorry for it because they're being.
Yeah. Okay, but psychotics, they can be medicated. They can you can have short-term psychosis where a form of PTSD where you haven't been crazy your whole life, but something's happened to you where you now have the inability to empathize. So you don't have to be criminally or mentally insane for your whole life. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So in prison, you can receive medications through commissary, things like that. So there is a way for you to be normal and be functioning in society, to be able to repent, realize what you've done, and feel sorry for it.
Okay. Row 1.
If you can
Row
consider the actions
1,
of
31, con 15.